Welcome to Straight Talk TV Community News, where we bring real news to you. Today we're here with Diane and we're going to learn a lot about this wonderful individual who I met personally during Hurricane Ida. I was trapped in my basement and almost drowned, and Diane came over to find out a little bit about what was going on with the community and why were we drowning in our basements. So it turns out that Diane is also running for U.S. Senate, and I'll let her take it from here. So Diane, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Diane Sayre. I am an independent candidate for U.S. Senate. That means I'm not with either of the major parties. And in New York, you're not allowed to use the word independent. So my party line is LaRouche because I worked with the great American statesman Lyndon LaRouche for 33 years until he passed away in 2019. And I would say he was probably the top economist that ever lived. And when I say economy, I don't mean money. I mean physical economy. That's why I was so concerned when I saw the flooding and that people had died in their basements, because that indicates a serious economic and political problem that I felt had to be addressed. And I was thrilled that you, Danette, were willing to talk to me and introduce me to the neighborhood and explain what had happened here.
Great. Thank you, Diane, for your concern. Truly, it means a lot to us. So tell me, what neighborhood are you from? And tell us about your family, your work, your hobbies.
Well, I grew up in Maine mostly. I spent some time in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because my father was drafted to serve in Vietnam, even though my family are Quakers. So unlike many people who became Quakers to get out of going, he was a Quaker who got drafted, so he did medical work in Vietnam, and therefore we moved to Albuquerque for a few years. And then my parents returned to Maine, which is where both of their families go way back. So I lived in Maine, married a guy from New Jersey, moved to New Jersey, and have moved now to New York, although I went to college for 1 year at Hamilton College in upstate New York, and now I live in Rockland County in Ramapo. My training, besides being a political organizer for many years, is that I am a classically trained musician, trombone player, and choir conductor. And always, I think it's the Quaker upbringing, the anti-slavery, speak truth to power, various aspects of that, which is why I decided that my calling was in politics, not to become a prostitute or get rich, but to actually do something to help people.
Oh, wow. I think I just learned a little bit more about you today, Diane. So what are your hobbies? What do you like to do for fun?
What I do for fun is cause trouble.
Okay.
With political leaders. I think, in fact, the first time we met, I showed you the video of when I was yelling at Senator Schumer in a cocktail party, which he threw me out of the meeting. But
challenge on.
Yeah. It's fun to fight for good. And of course, there are some things when I have time, I run. I'm a slow runner, but I jog a few days a week. And
that's why she's so slim.
Right.
And perfectly shaped.
Yeah. At any rate. The music, of course, has remained part of my life. I still direct the choir when I can. I still play the trombone as much as I can. I have an ancient dog who I enjoy spending time with, but he's gotten really cranky and is very demanding.
They can be.
Yeah. But this is fun. I mean, taking the whole world into your heart and meeting people from every walk of life and learning about them and trying to figure out how to make it better is fun. Now, it's maybe a little less fun today because I think we're in a really dangerous situation, and it hurts to see people suffering the way they are suffering today. it's really not right, and has to be changed, and we should never get in the mindset where we find it acceptable.
Absolutely. And that brings me to my next question, Diane. I understand that you're running for office. Please tell us about the challenges that you had to face.
Well, all right, and you know some of them directly because you helped with the petitioning. So the state of New York changed the law that if you are not a mainstream major party candidate, and they have Democrat, Republican, and then they have working families and conservative, which just shadow the major. They're not really independent parties. They're like a second line for the Democrats or a second line.
And a lot of people don't know that, so it's good. It's important that you address that. So
yeah, because the way they kept their ballot status is the conservatives put Donald Trump at the top of their ticket, and the working families put Biden. And so to keep your position on the ballot, you had to get over 2% of the vote. So in effect, they said, we're gonna give up our independence to go with the mainstream parties so we stay on, whereas the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Serve America Party actually were trying to keep their independence, so they didn't do any tricks, I'll put it that way. So they lost their ballot status.
okay.
And in 2018, it was the law that if you got 50,000 votes, your top candidate, like your top candidate for governor, got 50,000 votes, you would have a line on the ballot. You didn't have to petition. You could have a nominating convention, nominate your people, and they would be on the ballot. So in 2019, Governor Cuomo and the state legislature changed all of that, and they basically said that if you're gonna have a party line, you have to get 130,000 votes, tripling it in effect,
What was it before?
50,000.
Okay, so from 50,000 to 130,000
30,000 votes.
votes.
And then so if you lose that, so they all lost, they had one, Green and Libertarian had two candidates who each got over 100,000 votes. So they thought they were gonna have a party line and not have to petition. Then the rug gets pulled out from under them, the law is changed. They say, oh, sorry, you needed 130,000 votes. And now to get back on, instead of 15,000 signatures, if you're working families, conservative, Republican, Democrat, and you want to challenge in the primary election, you need 15,000 signatures statewide. As you know, we needed, right, they changed it, and suddenly you needed 45,000.
45,000. So from 15,000 signatures just to become a candidate, right?
Right.
Now you need 45,000 to become a candidate to even have an opportunity to run for office.
And they didn't change the time. So it's still 6 weeks.
Wow.
Which is unheard of. I mean, this has never been done in history. And that's why the first thing that happened when one of my friends, volunteers, who happens to be a lawyer, I told him last year, call the Board of Elections and find out, I want to get ready for the petitioning. I thought it was 15,000, and 15,000 is hard enough. And so he called, he said, Diane, I think you're gonna have to give up. And I said, why? And he said, it's 45,000. And I said, I didn't believe him. I thought, that's crazy. No one can do that. That must be a mistake. So I had two other people call. And then we found out, we got the actual documentation. And the Board of Elections, it's in the budget. They sneaked it into the budget. So you can go on the Albany Legislature website and see the old law. It's still there, and then they crossed it out in red. It's in color on the website, and they put the new requirements.
That's just,
so
unfair.
No, and I want to say
So
something.
un-American.
It is, because what they're saying is we don't want anyone who disagrees. If you're not with the narrative, if you're not with whatever the New York Times and CNN and the mainstream is saying, you are not allowed to have a voice.
Well, that's gotta change. So I'm wearing this nice shirt, Diane. Tell me a little bit about this symbol that we have over here.
Well, that's a treble clef, and when you petition to get on the ballot, they say you must choose an emblem because in the old days and going back forever, they had these emblems for people who couldn't read. So they knew if you wanted to vote for the Republican, you were Republican Party, then you look for the elephant and you vote for the
Democrat.
elephant. And Democrat.
And donkey for Republican. Correct?
Democrat for
Okay, we got it
donkey.
backwards.
Yeah, Democrat is a donkey, Republican is the elephant.
And then we would have had the treble clef for the independent.
Right, for my
Candidate.
campaign.
But
This year, after we petitioned and got the emblem because that was a requirement, the state suddenly has no emblems on the ballot anymore. And
I guess hers was too cool. They wanted this one and they couldn't have it, so
Right, no. And
no
they
one
were-
could have it if they can't have it.
Well, they were afraid because look, and you know very well, people are totally fed up with business as
Absolutely.
usual. Schumer has been there for 42 years. Pelosi has been there since before the Civil War. I'm not really sure how long she's been in there. Biden, how long has he been in politics? You know?
All too long.
Exactly. So you have what they call career politicians, which is actually against the intention of our founders. So all of our founders, all of the original Congress, our first president, George Washington, they had other jobs. They didn't think that someone would be a career politician,
Right.
right?
Which makes perfect sense.
Right, because why do you have representative government? You are supposed to represent the people. The people are not politicians. The people hold down jobs. They might be doctors or lawyers. They might be cleaning ladies. They might be home health aides. They might work in the subway. They might be farmers. They might be truck drivers. So you are taking really a sacred oath that somehow you are going to represent these people from all walks of life. And our Constitution was designed with very short terms. The House of Representatives is only a 2-year term. The Senate is a 6-year term because the Senate was supposed to be sort of a stabilizing body, but it's still 6 years.
I think 6 years is still too long.
Well, I think I can see that because then only a third is up at a time because you don't want to have the entire thing up every time. But and George Washington made a big point. He quit. He resigned, retired after 2 terms because he wanted to demonstrate that he was not a king, even though he had led us successfully through the revolution and people loved him, and I'm sure they would have voted for him over and over. He was a brilliant man, but he said, 2 terms, I'm leaving.
And it also allows to pass the baton to someone else to come along and do something great for the country, right? Because we're all gifted people. We just sometimes we don't even tap into it. We don't know what kind of gifts we might have. And when you allow someone else to go ahead and lead, then you allow them to their gifts to flourish, and you allow to see how they can add to this wonderful country. And so I love that he did that. That was wonderful. And nowadays it's
People
breathe.
just stay there as long as they can. And I had a funny conversation with an attorney, and I was kind of shocked. He said, well, they should really pay the Congress a lot more. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, because the people who are highly skilled, who can get good paying jobs, don't want to become congressmen because they can make a lot more money otherwise. And I would add perhaps that this is why people in the Congress, they end up getting a lot of money because they do nasty things on the side, right? Like insider trading, or they take bribes or whatever. The salary, unless something has changed, but in the last couple of months, has been at $174,000.
And if you look at the budget of most of these politicians that are in office today, they're millionaires, some even billionaires. So you ask yourself, how is that even possible?
Correct.
Diane just said how that's possible. They do side jobs, they do side deals. They coerce with corporations, stock market, big pharma, and they do crooked business deals that not only affect us in a grave way where we're we're being injured in many different ways, where it's our infrastructure or where it's our social security that's in danger, or so retirement is in danger, our children's education is in danger. So many things are in danger because of the greed from these politicians who are in term for just way too long. So yes.
Right, and I will say, because I'm seeing it now, it costs a lot of money to run for office. And I'm not spending I haven't raised millions, and I'm not a millionaire. And there's a big loophole because the Federal Elections Commission was created actually fairly recently. And they say, we're going to clean up the elections. Okay, so for a federal office, I can only accept money from US citizens or permanent residents, and it has to be personal money, not corporate, no corporate donations.
As it should be.
Yep, and there's a limit which now is $2,900 per election season per individual. So a married couple can give $5,800 per election cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but there's one giant loophole, which is what makes it an aristocracy. The candidate can spend as much of their own personal money as they want. So you figure it out. If Chuck Schumer is a multimillionaire and I am just a musician, below middle income person, I don't have millions of personal dollars to spend on my campaign. He does, and there's no problem. So right away it's an aristocracy. And when people ask me, well, what do you propose for election reform? Because now they made all these loopholes. There's a bill called Citizens United, where they basically said corporations are people. And now there are all these loopholes where you can get all these corporate donations, which is, again, how do the congressmen get controlled? Because they want that money for their campaign, right? So it's totally corrupt. And it's bad to make corporations people, but my idea, which would be very simple to solve it all, instead of donation limits, a spending limit.
Okay.
You're only allowed to spend X.
Keep it fair.
Yeah, and put a limit on it, right? And then New York City is shameful, okay, because in New York, if you're running for state office, I'm running for federal office, so I don't get matching funds. But if you're running for a city council, you're running for mayor or state legislature, you get matching funds. And we saw it in the mayoral race. There were like 32 candidates. The match is not 1-to-1, but if Joe Schmo gives you $250, the government will match it 8-to-1. So you get $250 from Joe Schmo and you get $2,000.
Wow.
Isn't that something? So now what you've created is this slime mold where people are just political operators. You have people all over, and
It becomes all about the dollar.
Right, and see, I didn't realize quite the extent of this and this 8-to-1 match thing, which is really bad. Because as soon as people heard I was a candidate, I want to work for your campaign, and I'm thinking, what is this, all these people? And then I said, oh my gosh, they all think that I'm gonna be swimming in money because of the 8-to-1 match, and they want me to pay them. But of course, I don't get matching funds either. So this campaign is such an outsider, right? I have everything stacked against me. But I just want to say back on the petitioning, because you remember when we began, I told people, you cannot pay people to do this. Because anyone who thinks they're clocking in and clocking out is not going to be able to do it. Because it's impossible. And what people did to get me on the ballot was frankly totally miraculous. We did it 7 days a week. We were out in the rain. We were arguing with the police and the shopping center security and you know.
Yes, we faced several challenges, but thankfully we were able to face those challenges in a very peaceful and political way, right?
We did it. Everything we did was totally legit. I saw one person, because you can find out through Freedom of Information if someone is going to challenge your petitions. They have a log who has taken out your petitions to look at them? One person took out our petitions. Nothing was filed, not one objection. We did such a good job because everything was on the up and up.
So we crossed every T and dotted every I. And that's what I admire so much about Diane, is that she's a woman, not only of her word, but she's a woman of honor. And we need honest people in leadership today. We need honest people running our country because we need people who care about people and not about the dollar, as we so horribly have in office. I have this article here, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about this article. It's called The New Federalist. Yes, tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this, as you can see, is a newspaper. And I actually started it for two reasons. One is I knew I was going to have to get a lot of signatures. I thought it was only 15,000, but I wanted to build a network. And I wanted to build a network by having people like you and others take the paper and distribute it and learn how to organize and become centers of activity. But also we have to have a way to combat the press. They lie about everything. So how can you get your own word out? And if you say certain things, which I don't even dare to say on cable television, you will be axed. We had the President of the United States lose his Twitter account right before the election. So Twitter, Facebook, all these things that I would use which I do use, as you know, but if I have a message to get out that I don't want censored, I want it in hard copy in print, because they can't stop me that way. And we have to have freedom of the press. We have to have freedom of speech.
So can people find this article on your website?
Yes, the New Federalist is on the website, and the website is Str8t.com, and you can find it under the New Federalist. There's PDF versions of it there.
Great, and I want you to repeat your contact information later on when we're done with this interview.
Okay.
But for right now, let me ask you, what can your constituents, should you win, expect from you as a U.S. Senator of New York, the state of New York?
I think they should expect that I will be causing a lot of trouble. I will probably get lots of negative press because I will be fighting for people. The first thing I want to do, which is something Schumer has opposed for decades, is to reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act, which separates the banks. It keeps the savings and loan banks in one category, so you can go and get a mortgage, or you can put your savings there. You maybe remember, you might be too young, but there was a time when we used to get interest on our savings accounts.
A decent interest.
Exactly. When I was the kid and I brought my little Christmas money in my yogurt container, I think I was 11 years old, and I brought $76 to the bank. And I got 5% interest on my savings account, and I was very excited checking, now forget it, you have to pay.
Like 0.1?
Yeah, and then you pay a million fees. We have to pay the bank for the privilege of them playing with our money, right? So you have to separate the banks, so the savings and loan banks only do that, and the investment banks, they can gamble, who cares? They can speculate on the weather, they can speculate on whether Yellowstone is going to blow up in a volcano, they can gamble on whatever they want, but we don't bail them out.
Right.
Right? If they bet the wrong way, done. Too bad, you lose. Can you imagine a gambling casino where you go in and you get a money back guarantee?
They would be out of business
pretty quick. Well, that's like Wall Street now, right? They get a money back guarantee. They can do whatever they want. They can lose everything. And we, the working people, bail them out. So my first act would be reinstate that firewall between the speculative activity and the savings and loans. And that was
great.
And it would require actually going through the books because the banks are all mushed together now. The Glass-Steagall used to be in place until 1999. So for 23 years, the banks have now mixed everything together and made a total mess of things. So people would have to go in and sort out and say, okay, this goes in this side, this goes in this side, this is garbage, this is drug money laundering, okay, you go to jail. You know, clean out the banks. And then when you're done, you'll have this beautiful savings and loan system. So we can take the Federal Reserve and put it back under Congress as a national bank, not a big private bank. And then the Congress can say, hey, you know what? We need to spend $9 trillion on modernizing all the infrastructure in this nation. And you have a means to direct the credit at 1 and 2% interest, low interest, because you're doing things that are going to raise the standard of living as a whole.
That is fabulous, Diane. Oh my goodness. Okay, what else can we expect?
Well, once we get that, then certain things like we talked about so much, the Outer Harbor Gateway, the storm surge barrier, right? Because, and I think they, you know, I put out this program, and I've put it out in the New Federalist, the storm surge barrier, the Outer Harbor Gateway, because it was proposed in 2009 by the American Society of Civil Engineers.
Right.
And also the Dutch, very interesting, it wouldn't have occurred to me, but they said if you really want reliable surge protection, you don't want little piecemeal things close to the coast. That is, the farther out that you can build it, the better it works. So in Holland, they tend to build really big projects, and of course Amsterdam is totally below sea level, but no one would say, oh, you should move the city, right?
Right.
They just build the infrastructure, right?
Correct.
So now in the last 2 weeks, I don't know if you saw it, but they're pushing a project for $52 billion of 12 different small sea gates. And I think they're only doing that because because people are beginning to say, hey, why don't we build this big thing? You know, from Sandy Hook in New Jersey to the Rockaways.
Mm-hmm.
And it would protect all of Staten Island, all of Lower Manhattan, and then you have to put the Throgs Neck Sea Gate by Throgs Neck also.
And I believe it has like a multi-purpose, because I think that there's the ability to have like a highway run over it.
Exactly.
Where it would cut costs for commuting.
Well, you could get from New Jersey to Long Island and you wouldn't have to go through Manhattan. Or you could have a rail corridor. If we reindustrialize the United States, Long Island is super high tech. They produced a lot of stuff for the space program. So you produce it there, get on the train, go through New Jersey, out Pennsylvania, out to Detroit, for example. And then you could have another corridor which goes from Long Island up to Albany and then across Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo.
That sounds like a no-brainer. I mean, I don't understand what's going on with our country. So that sounds fabulous. So what else can we expect as well?
Well, I think we have to reach out to other superpowers, and we decided Russia, China, India, big nations, we're going to become the enemy. So for decades, we have been trying to destroy Russia. And that's what the Iraq War, the Libya, this wasn't about Iraq or Libya, it was all to encircle Russia and destroy Russia. And Russia knew this. And frankly, they've been remarkably calm. And I'll tell you, Putin is under excruciating pressure from within Russia to be much more aggressive. They're saying, why are you being so nice? Why are you letting Ukraine have all its power plants and its infrastructure? Why didn't you destroy Kiev? So the people in Russia are furious. They think Putin is way too moderate because we are destroying their infrastructure. We are sending $70 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine. And the Russians have been extremely careful, contrary to the news media here. They are trying to avoid killing civilians. They haven't destroyed all the infrastructure. You know, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Mitch McConnell, they all went to Kiev. Now how can all these muckety-mucks go to Kiev if they don't have running water, electricity, decent security, right? So if Putin had wanted to destroy Ukraine, you don't think he would have leveled the capital, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right? So he was simply trying to, what he said, get rid of the Nazis, get rid of the military. He said, we can't have a hostile power on our border with nuclear weapons. You should remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Union put nuclear missiles in Cuba. Kennedy, thank God we had a Kennedy, not a Biden, he opened up a back channel with Khrushchev. And for a while, for a few days, the world was really worried, were we gonna have a nuclear war? How was the United States going to get the Soviet Union to pull these missiles out? And we had a blockade. We had a confrontation with Soviet ships coming in where the US Navy was blocking them. And people didn't know, are we gonna have a nuclear war? What's gonna happen? So we should remember Cuba is 90 miles from the coast of the US. Ukraine is right on the border of Russia. If we didn't think it was acceptable to have nuclear missiles 90 miles from our border, why would we put nuclear missiles on Russia's border? And that's what Putin said. He was screaming about this last December. He said, look, there's a few red lines. Ukraine cannot have nuclear weapons. Ukraine cannot join NATO. You ought to remember that. And 3, if you have ethnic cleansing against the Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine, I can't tolerate ethnic cleansing. I will not tolerate a mass genocide.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So what happens, it was like a roadmap for the British Empire and these bankrupt banks and the Biden administration and NATO. They said, oh, Putin said don't do this. Okay, let's do that. He said don't do this. Okay, we're gonna do that. And he said no ethnic cleansing. Okay, let's move. And so we heard in the press, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. Russia, how many months did we hear this? Months, right? Russia's going to invade Ukraine. Russia's going to invade Ukraine. What were we doing? NATO was arming and training the Ukrainian army to move about 100,000 troops up to the border of the Donbass, where you have the contested area, which is mostly Russian speaking. And they began shelling, and they dropped 1,600 shells on Donetsk, the capital city of the Donetsk Republic, in one day. And Putin said, okay, but that's it. I'm going to have to come in and stop this because I'm not going to let you kill. They had already killed 14,000 people over 8 years. And he said, I'm not going to let you kill. That whole region maybe had over 4 million or something. I'm not going to let you kill millions of people. Enough. And they even found documents after the Russians came in there. They found that there were NATO computers being used by the Ukrainian army. They found documents saying we're planning a blitzkrieg, like a mass slaughter. So now what do? Do we say let's negotiate? Can we get peace? No, we say go Ukraine, keep fighting. We're gonna send weapons and weapons and weapons and weapons. We don't care if every last Ukrainian soldier gets killed because we want to destroy Russia. That's what's going on. We don't care about, did we care about Afghanistan? How's Afghanistan doing these days? 20 million people about to die of starvation.
So how would you handle the Russia and Ukraine situation?
I think we have to negotiate, and the US is going to have, we have a big problem right now because no one will trust the United States with good reason. We have ruined our trustworthiness. I was happy to hear that President Trump yesterday said, we have to negotiate. We have to negotiate. The US has to negotiate. Stop it. Stop arming Ukraine. Ukraine is going to have to be neutral, period. They cannot join NATO. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. Crimea is part of Russia. They had a referendum. They voted 96% to join Russia. That is done. Donetsk, Lugansk. You know, Elon Musk put an interesting idea on the table. He said the 4 regions that were formerly Ukraine that have now joined Russia, he said, well, you might make an argument that at least in Zaporizhia and Kherson, those are 2 of the 4, maybe so many people fled that you didn't have a fair vote. So redo that vote under UN supervision to see if those people still want to join Russia or not. But if they vote to join Russia, they're part of Russia. The UN Charter says self-determination. You have to respect the right of what people vote. And in the two places where the Ukrainian army killed 14,000 people over 8 years, I talked to a very courageous young woman journalist who's on the ground there. She said, look, I was going around looking at the elections. The people here said, we've been trying to join Russia for 8 years. We wish Putin would have accepted our republics earlier. So they're not going to revote. And see, none of this will you hear in the US media, right? Instead, and you know this, I'm on a hit list. I'm on a Ukrainian.
Yeah, I read about that and I was just like, whoa. I mean, how far will these people, you know, meaning Schumer or anyone who is challenged in the Democratic Party, go to actually ridicule and, you know, shame those of us who are willing to stand up for the Constitution and for our rights. You know, bringing up the Constitution, please tell me, Diane, should the Constitution be here to stay, and why?
I appreciate that. Yes, the Constitution. And you see, you have some people, we have a terrible cultural problem in the United States right now.
Meaning?
Called nominalism. Or that you say, I read the words and they mean, don't talk about intent. But you know, and you speak at least 2 languages that I know of, when you express something in words, or you can think of it this way, there may be some things in Spanish for which there really is no translation in English. And you can try and create an idea, but it's not in the words. The idea is in your mind, and then your words, you somehow create an image, which might give another person the idea. But it's bigger than the words. So if you take the preamble of our Constitution, it says certain things, right? We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union. And the first thing, establish justice, right? Ensure, I forget the domestic tranquility, you know, the common defense, and promote the general welfare. Now, what does that mean? That means that the government has an obligation to promote the general welfare, to protect the well-being of the people. And you should not need, and there's a clause, right, necessary and proper later in the Constitution, because they presumed that people were not morons and not literalists, and they said, is this policy good for the people? If it allows a higher standard of living, if it protects the freedom of people to be creative, it should be a protective policy. If it is destructive to people, if it reduces their life expectancy, if it causes them harm, then it is a bad policy.
Well, if that was the case, then the Constitution wouldn't be around as long as it has been. I feel that our Constitution is gravely in danger, and we need to do everything that we can to protect our Constitution. Our Constitution is the only thing that separates America from every other country, and it is the only thing that allows people to have the ability to choose and the freedom to live as, you know, as they choose. And so we need to protect the Constitution. And Diane, I admire that you want to protect our Constitution. And I really hope that you do win, that you get elected and that you do win, and that Schumer is completely removed out of office, and that you will do everything you can to protect our Constitution.
Yeah, well, the Constitution should be the people, right? That's my point. It's an idea and it's a principle. And that's what people are sworn to uphold. And that's why soldiers even, they swear to uphold the Constitution. That's why you can convict people of war crimes, right? If you do something, if you torture someone, if you do things that are against our Constitution, then you're violating it. You're in the wrong. That was the beauty of the United States, right? And now it's become this thing of whoever has the most money and the most power to jam things down your throat. That's who runs the show, and that is not what our nation was supposed to be based on, and that's not what is in that document.
We don't need kings, we don't need dictators. We don't need evil rulers, we just need fair and justice, and we need to live like human beings, not like animals. And we need to be treated with respect, and I agree with all your policies. I'm looking forward to those becoming a reality and an effect. Once again, I'm going to ask you, Diane, how can people contact your office? How can they contact you? Is there a website, an email, phone number? Also, once again, tell us about the new Federalists, how people can get involved with that.
Good. Well, people can go to Str8t, and that's SAREFORSENATE, Str8t.com. That's my website. You can sign up to get copies of the new Federalists to distribute. You can sign up to get yard signs. You can sign up to volunteer. The phone number for the campaign is 646-328-1932, 646-328-1932. 1932 is the year that Franklin Roosevelt got elected. That's why I chose that number. And was there more? The newspaper?
Yes, the new Federalist, we can find it on your website. But tell us how people can get involved with this.
Well, if you go to my website and sign up, we ask people to take 25, 50, 100 copies. It comes out approximately every month. We only have 1 month left until the election. In fact, this program may air just a week before the election. Also on Str8t.com, you will see the weekly symposium. Every Friday night I have a discussion at 7:30 p.m., which you've participated in a few times.
I was just going to ask you about that.
And I'm looking at things that really affect the population. This past Friday we had actually a devastating one on the Schumer's marijuana bill with a black minister from Newark, New Jersey, who described all the laws that they were told. Nobody had their record expunged. None of all of this stuff they claim will happen. And a criminal litigator who is demanding records of violent crimes to see if people were under the influence. Because they try to say, oh no, drugs have no effect on your behavior, no, it's not related. But then come to find out, like the Uvalde killer, many of these mass shooters are like high or totally on drugs all the time, regularly.
And even most of the time, they're prescription drugs.
It can be.
That are affecting these people because opioids, those are prescribed. And those are drugs that either you can get in the street or nowadays you could just get a prescription for, and they still have the same effect on people, which is a negative effect, which definitely is going to hinder their ability to do the right thing.
Well, it's all about control.
And
it's about controlling the population, manipulating people. And I began the program actually with a young mother who's formed a group of parents who are trying to educate their children and protect them from all of the things coming in through the schools. And she's been looking at the addictiveness of smartphones and screens. Because and there was just an editorial in the New York Times by a guy who designs video games. He said, I make video games, I won't let my children play them. Because he said, we are trained to study, you're selling advertising. So what you want is to addict people. So you study what makes someone stay on longer, what do they like, and then you tailor it to make it as addictive as possible. So he said that's why almost everyone in Silicon Valley, we're the ones who make the toys, none of us let our children even have an iPhone
Hmm.
because they know how they are brainwashing the population.
Wow, that's
Yeah, everything is worse than you think, isn't it?
so. Definitely, you don't agree with legalizing drugs.
Do not. No. I don't think, we have a terrible problem in this country. We don't have justice. So you have people who are poor, who are minorities, who bear the brunt of that. That is true. Get outrageously long prison sentences and so on. And then if people have money, they never go to jail, there's no penalty, they can do whatever they want. So I know that many people said, well, we had this war on drugs and it just put a bunch of poor people in jail and now we can't have a war on drugs. I would say we never had a war on drugs because we never went after the banks. We never went after the people running it. We didn't use the satellite, we used satellite technology to spy on people, but we didn't use the satellites to go find the coca fields and wipe them out. So we never did a war on drugs, we did a war on people. Because we said we're gonna arrest all of you and we're gonna have private prisons and we're gonna use you for slave labor. And so now they say, okay, let's legalize drugs because the war on drugs failed because we put all these people in jail. Well, no, you never shut down the drugs. Now you wanna commercialize it. And these pot dispensaries, they're making a product with 99% THC.
Wow.
Children, in just 1 year in New York, and we don't even have, there's 900 dispensary licenses where the shops haven't been opened yet.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't even started yet. In 1 year of marijuana legalization, the number of children going to the emergency room increased 6-fold because they are targeting children.
I mean, forget about having a doctor operate on you while high. Our children won't even become doctors. You know, they won't even get to be lawyers and doctors and, professionals because they'll be high on drugs. You know, they won't want to study, they won't want to work hard, they won't have good ethics, and, yeah, that's just going to destroy our country even more.
And the suicides, actually. One of the experts I had on said he's in a litigation right now because they prescribed quote-unquote medical marijuana for a young man who was suffering, I forget what, some disease, and he committed suicide. And there is a link, a lot of parents who have dealt with this between the marijuana and the suicide.
So that proves right there that, that is not the answer. Legalizing drugs is definitely not the answer. It's actually, it's critical. It's going to hurt us more than anything. Anything else you'd like to say, Diane?
We have a mess. We are seeing in this country what people never imagined would happen. And we have to face that. And then we have to say, okay, we're drawing a line. We're not going back, we're gonna change everything. And it does start with the money, like you were saying. That's why I'm saying we bankrupt these bastards. These people who have been ripping us off, who've been making us, what do you pay for a parking ticket? Or a toll?
It's ridiculous.
Or taxes, right? You had a neighbor who said, I agree, if they're gonna say the residents here are responsible for the sewer, which is unheard of, that is totally outrageous, that I would say, okay, we're not gonna pay taxes anymore. What are we paying for? Right, so you end that looting. The government has to be accountable to the people, and specifically that principle of the general welfare. And we can do that, and I think we're gonna have to put some of these big bankers in jail. We're gonna have to we'll give them a fair trial.
I'd love to see that.
They'll get a fair trial. But they have to be punished not because we should have punishment, and I don't think they should be beaten and tortured and horrible things like that, right? But you have to say, we're cleaning up this mess, and it's not gonna be accepted anymore. And we are going to be proud to show our face. Those people who take the sacred oath of public office to represent people should be proud to be seen. I've seen 2 videos this week of both Schumer and Biden, who reporters come to ask them questions.
And they run.
They run away. They run away.
Yes.
Yeah, so I will not do that. I will not run away from my constituents. I will tell people what I did and why I did it, and it will be for the best interest of people. People may not agree, that's their right to disagree, but when you take that oath of office, you have to defend the principles of the Constitution, and that means the well-being of the people. Otherwise, there's no point in having a government.
With that said, I just want to say thank you, Diane. It's a pleasure knowing you, and I think the country is in good hands with you in office. So thank you.
Thank you.